we'll be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map based on the newest poll from every single state. And so we're going to fill in the map based on poll closing order. Voting doesn't end in every single state at the same time. It'll end first in states on the East Coast, and then the map will slowly fill out west. And so in this video, you'll be able to see how the map is going to be colored in red and blue on the night of November 5th. And so we're going to start off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where polls are going to close in 6 states. These 6 states make up a combined 60 electoral votes, most of which are going to be solid for one candidate or the other. Donald Trump is easily going to win Indiana, Kentucky, and South Carolina by solid margins, while Vermont, the most liberal state in the country, will easily go to the vice president. Virginia, though, is going to be much more competitive. Many polls have it as a toss-up. In fact, a recent Research America poll has the vice president ahead by just 1%. The latest Emerson College poll, though, shows her up by 7%. This is probably overestimating her support, as Emerson College tends to lean to the left. But based on the newest poll that we have, Virginia is going to be likely blue, but just barely. Down in Georgia, we have our first swing state, a state that Joe Biden won in the last election. Georgia is going to be very close once again, but this time, Donald Trump has the lead. He's ahead in the most recent Atlas Intel poll. Atlas Intel poll was the #1 most accurate pollster in the 2020 election. Looking at the spread of the last 8 polls conducted in the Peach State, Kamala Harris leads in just 2 of them. There's no doubt that going into October, the former president has a huge advantage in the swing state of Georgia, which is going to be tilt red on our map. Next up, at 7:30 p.m., voting will end in 3 additional states. Trump is easily going to win West Virginia, while in Ohio, he's on track to carry the Buckeye State for a 3rd time. He leads by 6 points in the most recent poll. However, this is a left-leaning poll conducted by the New York Times and Siena College. In the end, he's probably going to win Ohio by a double-digit margin when all the votes are counted, and so on our map, Ohio is going to be lean red, but in the end, it is going to be a likely state for Trump at the very minimum. And then down in North Carolina, this is the second swing state on the map. Georgia has already gone to Trump, and now in North Carolina, the former president has also retaken the lead. He is ahead by 2% in the most recent poll. Polling in the state has been pretty competitive over the last few weeks, if you just go by the raw numbers. But in 2020, all the polls said Joe Biden was going to win North Carolina. In fact, he led throughout the entire 2020 calendar year in the polling average. There was not a single point in time where Trump took the lead in North Carolina in 2020, but in the end, Biden lost the state. Trump came out on top by 1.3%. And with Trump leading today, it's a pretty good sign that he's going to win the Tar Heel state for a 3rd time, a state he won in both 2016 and 2020, and now 2024, North Carolina is going to be lean red. Moving on to the 8 p.m. poll closing, voting will end in 15 states across the eastern half of the United States, as well as the District of Columbia. It's at this point where we'll get a sense of how the rest of the night is going to go, whether Trump or Harris are outperforming expectations. At this point, many races will be quickly called in either Trump or Harris's favor. The former president is easily going to win Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, while the vice president will take Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, with New Jersey and Delaware as likely blue states. Moving on up to the Northeast, we have 2 competitive races in New Hampshire and Maine. The polling here is really skewed in favor of Democrats. We've had a lot of bad polls come out over the last few weeks. The University of New Hampshire is probably the worst pollster out there. They consistently overestimate Democrats and are always outliers. According to their recent New Hampshire poll, Harris leads by 11%. That simply isn't going to happen. While in Maine, they had a poll that said Harris was going to win by 17%. That is even more unlikely considering Joe Biden only won Maine by 9 points in the last election. But according to the most recent Pan-Atlantic Research poll, the vice president is ahead by 9 points. In Maine's 1st district, she is going to win by a solid margin, while in the 2nd district, Trump leads by 7 points in that recent poll. So, New Hampshire is going to be likely blue, along with the state of Maine as a whole, while its 1st district will be solid, and the 2nd district will likely go for Trump. Down in Florida, we have a state that really just doesn't attract the attention it once did. Even in 2020, it was considered one of the most important states in the entire country. But in the end, Trump won it by 3.4%. Republicans did amazing in the midterms, with the Senate seat going to Marco Rubio by 16 points and the governorship to Ron DeSantis by nearly 20. Today, Donald Trump has taken a commanding lead in the Sunshine State. He leads by 4% in the most recent poll, and this was conducted by a Democratic sponsor, so he's probably winning by more. In the end, I fully expect the former president to carry Florida by 7 to 10 points. It's going to be likely red in the end, but according to the peer data we have right now, the most recent poll has it as a lean red state, but a victory nonetheless, providing him with 30 crucial electoral votes. And finally, in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State's 19 electoral votes are going to be the most important on this map. Because if Trump wins North Carolina and Georgia, and he also wins Pennsylvania, he's going to get to 270 electoral votes if he wins all of the other solid red states that we have yet to fill in. And the good news for him is that, according to the most recent Patriot polling poll, Trump leads by a 1% margin. In fact, he leads in all 5 of the most recent polls from the Keystone State. There's no doubt he's going to win Pennsylvania. He has taken a commanding lead and is ahead on Real Clear Politics now as well. So the state is going to be tilt red, and this will be more than enough for the former president to get to 270 electoral votes, as long as he wins all the other states that he is currently expected to carry. 30 minutes later, at 8:30, polls will close in Arkansas, which Trump is going to easily win. Fast forward another half hour, and we'll see voting end in 14 states across the country, from Arizona all the way to New York, worth a total of 157 electoral votes. We'll start off with the solid states and get them out of the way. Donald Trump is easily going to win North and South Dakota, along with Wyoming, all of Nebraska except its 2nd District, Kansas, and Louisiana, while Kamala Harris does not have any solid states at this time. Moving on to the competitive states, we'll begin in Colorado, where Kamala Harris leads by a double-digit 10-point margin in the most recent poll. This poll conducted by Morning Consult and Bloomberg. They are probably one of the most biased pollsters out there. Their polls are always outliers. Colorado is probably still go to Kamala Harris, but likely by around a 7-point margin. But based on just the data we have right now, the state is going to be likely blue. But I expect it to be a lot closer than what the polls are currently telling us. In New Mexico, the vice president leads by 8% in the most recent Survey USA poll. This is a little more accurate. She's probably going to win the state by around 6 to 7 points. 8 points is really not too far off. We even have some polls from earlier last month showing Harris up by just 5. And into New Mexico, based on the most recent poll, is just barely going to squeak by as a likely state for the vice president. Next up, in Texas, we have a state where Democrats simply do not have a chance. They thought they could win it in 2020. Many polls said that Joe Biden was going to lose the Lone Star State by just 1%. That was never going to happen, even from the beginning. He lost the state by 6% when all the votes were counted, and today, Donald Trump is on track to win the state for a 3rd time in a row. He leads by 5 points in the most recent poll, but this is a Democratic-sponsored poll. I would expect Trump to win Texas by a double-digit margin. It is probably going to be likely red when all the votes are counted this November. And so, Texas will be lean red based on just the pure data, but I fully expect the former president to perform much better. The 2nd District of Nebraska is going to be likely blue, with Harris leading by 9 points in the most recent poll. Then we have one more likely blue state at this hour, and that will be the Empire State of New York, which is surprisingly competitive. Kamala Harris leads by 14 points in the most recent poll. In fact, just 1 out of the last 5 polls has her ahead by a solid 15-point margin, despite every single Democrat since Bill Clinton in 1992 having been able to win New York by 15 percentage points or more. She's currently on track to pull off the worst performance in this state since Michael Dukakis in 1988. The Empire State will be likely blue on our map. Now, we're left with the 4 most competitive states, where voting will end at 9 p.m. We're going to begin down in Arizona, worth 11 electoral votes. Trump is currently on track to win. There's no doubt about that. He's taken a pretty commanding lead in the state. In fact, out of all 7 of the swing states, none of them currently lean more to the right than Arizona. Trump leads by 1% in the most recent poll, but besides the 2 Morning Consult polls, which again heavily lean towards the left, every other poll has shown Trump ahead, with one of them showing a tie. And so currently the state of Arizona is going to be tilt red based on the most recent poll. But Trump is performing a lot better than he was in 2020, when he lost the state entirely to Joe Biden. Moving up now to the Midwest, we have Minnesota. This is Tim Walz's home state. Kamala Harris chose Minnesota's governor to be her running mate, and according to the most recent poll, she leads by 6%. None of the polls released in September showed her leading by more than 7 points. In fact, every single one of them has her underperforming Joe Biden's 7.1% margin from back in 2020. And when Joe Biden ran in the last election, he did not have Minnesota's literal governor on the ticket with him. So, Kamala Harris leading by anything less than 7 points is pretty abysmal and a sign that she is going to perform much worse than Joe Biden did 4 years ago. Minnesota is going to be lean blue on our map, with the most recent poll having her ahead by just 6 points. This is not where she wants to be. Next up, in Wisconsin, I can see this being the closest state in the country. It's probably going to be decided by the smallest margin out of any of the competitive states. Trump did win the state in 2016 by 0.76%. He lost it in 2020 by a smaller margin. Biden carried it by just 0.63%. But this was an incredibly surprising margin. Joe Biden was supposed to win Wisconsin by 7 points, according to the polling average. He won it by less than a tenth of his predicted margin. And so today, Donald Trump leads in the most recent Atlas Intel poll. Once again, this was the most accurate pollster of the 2020 election cycle. Trump leading in any poll from Wisconsin is a pretty big deal because 4 years ago, we had just lines of polls showing that Biden was going to win by 6, 7, or even double digits sometimes. And he eventually won the state, but by a much lesser margin than anyone could have expected. And this is yet another sign that Trump is doing much better than he was in 2020, with Wisconsin currently as a tilt red state on our map based on the most recent poll. Then in Michigan, Trump has also taken the lead, according to the latest Atlas Intel poll. He leads by a 4% margin. We have a previous poll from the New York Times that shows an even race between Harris and Trump, and considering that the New York Times is a left-leaning pollster, this is a pretty good result for the former president. And on top of that, you have to consider the fact that Michigan has always underestimated support for the former president. In 2016, he wasn't even supposed to get anywhere close to defeating Hillary Clinton, and in 2020, Biden was supposed to win Michigan by 7 to 8 points. He eventually won it by less than 3. And so, based on the current data, Michigan is going to be lean red, with Donald Trump on track to win the state by a larger margin than both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. An hour later, at 10 p.m. on the East Coast, voting will end in 4 additional states. Trump is easily going to win Montana and Utah, while Iowa is going to be slightly more competitive. Based on just the polling, the state is going to be lean red, with the former president ahead by 4 points. But we all know he's going to win the state by upwards of 8 to 10. Polling in 2020 did the same thing. It heavily underestimated Trump. He was supposed to win Iowa by just over 1%. He eventually won it by 8.2. And so Trump being ahead by 4 isn't that big of a deal. He's still going to win the state and its 6 electoral votes. But Iowa, for now, will be lean red on our map. And then in Nevada, we find our last swing state. The silver state hasn't gone red since 2004, so Trump never won the state. Not in 2016 or 2020. He's won every other swing state at some point in the last 2 election cycles, but Nevada is one that he's never been able to capture. Looking at the polling today, Kamala Harris leads by just 1%, but the tides here are turning. According to the polling average, we essentially have a tied race. I can definitely see Trump flipping the silver state this cycle. The state overestimated Biden by around 3 points last time, and Kamala Harris simply isn't performing nearly as well as Biden was in the last election. She leads by 1 point in the most recent poll. That honestly doesn't say too much. We had a previous poll from Quantum Insights with Trump up by 1. Considering that Nevada is shifting to the right, with the state electing a Republican governor back in 2022, I would say Trump is still the slight favorite here. But based on just the data alone, it is going to be tilt blue on our map. Kamala Harris is going to win just one of the 7 battleground states. And then, at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, voting will end in 5 additional states. Harris is going to win Washington, California, and Hawaii by solid margins. Oregon's going to be likely blue, and Idaho will be solid red. And then finally, at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, Trump is going to win Alaska. This will give him 3 electoral votes. Based on the newest poll from every single state, the former president is going to win 6 of 7 swing states. This will give him 306 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 232. Trump has now taken a commanding lead, particularly in the Midwest.